Welcome to the Nurturing Fathers Podcast, a show dedicated to helping men succeed at the most challenging and rewarding job they'll ever have, being a dad. Your hosts are Mark Perlman, the creator and founder of the Nurturing Fathers program, and his son, Corey Perlman, who facilitates the program at the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary and is also a father of 2 young children. It's time to add tools to your Nurturing Fathers toolbox. Mark and Corey, take it away.
As a good facilitator might do in this conversation. Did you have a question that you wanted Dad to answer?
I wanted to ask Mark about his men's group and around the facilitation, because you mentioned, did you say 30 years, Mark, you've been doing?
32 years with this particular group, yeah.
Who's been facilitating? Does it move around or has it been mostly one person?
Great question. This was the second or third men's group I was in. The other ones were a couple of years each. I facilitated because I had this interest long before I came to the Nurturing Fathers program. My interest was stimulated by watching my wife involved in the women's groups and seeing how much they got out of it and saying, hey, we could use this as well. I could personally use this as well. So this second group I facilitated for the first 8 or 10 years of its 32 years. And then we all decided, the group and myself, that they didn't need a facilitator anymore, that we could basically do this as a non-facilitated group. At the time, I was going to choose to leave the group because it's a hard role to sort of give up. But I realized it's so valuable to me that I decided to stay as a member and just close my mouth and stitch up my lip and not talk so much. And it's worked out magnificently that I could just be a full participant and not be in the role of facilitator. So it's a self-facilitating group. We always start with personal time. Any guy who needs to speak on a personal issue gets priority. And then we might go around, see how each of the 8 or 9 of us are doing, what's going on in our lives, or we have topics that we can pull out and we could address as a group. But it runs itself now. It's unfacilitated for the last 20 years.
That's fascinating. And I asked because I have real interest, because after I finished doing the Nurturing Fathers program, I went and actually worked on a statewide level and did a lot of training around helping other people get more fathers involved in the programs that they were running, family support programs. I missed having that group like the Nurturing Fathers program. So I created this men's group, Brothers Healing Circle, and off and on for 10 years, facilitated this. And just last August, in fact, a year ago, I took a sabbatical because I knew I didn't want to facilitate it any longer. And fortunately, another, great, strong man stepped up and took on the facilitation role. I'm writing another book, a historical novel about healing intergenerational trauma. So I've just kind of stepped back from the group for now, but I do feel that desire to get back involved. And I think now, after not being there for a year, I can go back in as a participant a little easier without, making that transition just a little.
Yeah. It's a big transition, a big change, but I'm so glad I made it. When I sit down in that circle every 2 weeks now, part of me just relaxes totally and feels at home and open for anything and everything.
I'm curious, as you reflect back on your sort of journey in the Nurturing Fathers program, of a story or even 2 of meaningful moments that you remember from the Nurturing Fathers program, whether it was a participant in the class or just a breakthrough, or just a story that kind of encompasses what you think is the power of the Nurturing Fathers program. So I'm going to give you a chance to think about that for a second. And for those of you listening, if you're like me, just staying connected to Haji is just, I love either listening to him. I've loved reading his book. He's got a new book coming out, which sounds really exciting. I wouldn't mind you talking about that for a second too, Haji. And I just want to let everybody know how to kind of, Google Haji. He's on LinkedIn. He's got the book on here and you can learn more about him. It's Haji Shearer. I'm going to spell his name. It's Haji and then Shearer. Again, that's HajiShearer. And when you take a look at Haji, you can stay connected with him in many different ways. But Haji, have I given you enough time to think of a memory or 2 from the Nurturing Fathers program?
There's so many. I mean, it's just like every night there was an epiphany, Every night there were light bulbs going off over guys' heads. The 2 that really strongly in my mind, though, was this one gentleman. This was a group that was actually happening at a DCF office, and most of the men in the circle, usually, about a dozen guys in the group that night, the first night that we started, and they were all, most of them involved with Department of Children and Families for some reason or other. And they were all a little guarded, let's say, about being in the group. And that very first evening, there's the activity about imagining your dad, right? And I haven't looked at the curriculum in a while. I haven't facilitated that group in a few years, but it asks you to, kind of imagine your father, if you knew him or if you didn't know him. And it's a nice guided visualization. Well, there's this one gentleman in the group who just started to break down and cry. And this is not the only time that this happened during this activity. And it's the first evening. These guys just all met one another. They've all got their armor up. They're all, kind of, urban men of color, not really, into just opening up and crying in front of a group of other men. And this guy started to break down and cry and actually got up and left the circle. And we had a co-facilitator. Two of us were doing the group that night. And so I finished the work with the circle. And one of my co-facilitators went out to chat with this guy. And he came back in and sat down. Not everybody was aware of what happened, but a few people kind of, opened their eyes. They felt the commotion and kind of left, but not everybody was aware of what was happening because some, people had, we asked people to close their eyes and that. But when he came back in and he described this pain that he had shoved down. Another gentleman in the fatherhood world, I forget who it was, you may remember this, Mark, but he says that guys have a hole in their soul the size of their father. And this guy had never met his dad, and he had just shut down that energy. And by doing this activity that night, it all came like, kind of just barreling back at him. And even though he had never met the other men in the group before, and I'm sure he felt somewhat ashamed at having broken down and cried, the other guys spontaneously just elevated to a level of empathy where they were really like the overriding emotion in the group was, it's okay, I feel you, I see you, I understand. And I can feel the emotion in me welling up now. And by him breaking down and crying, it gave other men in the group, like, I hear you. My dad wasn't there as well. Or my dad was, problematic in this way. Or my dad did this or that. And the energy that night was just magnificent. And that guy helped us so much by being courageous enough to go into that feeling and not shove it down anymore. And thank you, Mark, for, putting that exercise in the first week where if people are willing to feel it, they can make tremendous change. And that guy opened up not just for himself and for the group, but for his 4-year-old kid that he wasn't really able to see because DCF had custody of his child and he and the mom were broken up. But by going through that group and having that epiphany that night, he was able to build a better relationship with his kid because it was so freaking clear to him he didn't want to do to his kid what had happened to him.
Beautifully told story, Shajai. Thank you so much.
That's amazing. Look, Dad, this is our podcast, so we can last as long as we want. Did you have another one, Ajay? Because we'll take another one.
I got one more.
Go for it, man.
So that was night 1, right? This is the bookend. On night 13, the graduation ceremony. There was a woman actually who was involved knew her from the human service community. She knew I was doing this group, and she was like, you got to let my husband come to this group. He needs this group, right? And often, that's how people, like guys don't often, kind of sign themselves up for this group, right? Oftentimes they're persuaded, like somebody else suggests, like, it might be a good idea if you did this group. So her husband came. He started like week 3. Generally after week 3, we don't let people join. And he was like, so he's one of the last men in the group. And, we just had a great experience. And I don't remember, any aha moments with him so much. But that last night at the graduation, his wife, who, was a colleague of mine, a work partner, didn't see her every day, but I knew her from the, kind of work scene. And she, again, had recommended him, had asked, for me to call him up. I did my, kind of persuasion thing. It would be a great thing coming. He was just a good group member. But that night at the graduation, she just pulled me off to the side and said, I don't know what you did. But he changed. He spends more time with the kids now, easier to get along with. He helps more with, the housework. He's just a better dad now. Thank you.
Wow, beautiful. And thank you, Haji, for the work you have done. Any tool, nurturing fathers included, is only as good as the hands that it's in. And when I know it's been in your hands, I know it has been done to the utmost. So thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. Again, my love to you and your family. And I hope our paths cross again soon. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. I look forward to it. Corey, Mark, you guys are awesome. You're angels. You're bringing light into the world. I appreciate that. And keep doing what you're doing. I look forward to working together, working more closely soon.
Thank you.
As do I, my friend. Thank you again for being on. We appreciate you.
All right. Likewise. Peace and love.
Thanks for listening to the Nurturing Fathers podcast. Have questions or comments? Join the conversation at facebook.com/nurturingfathers or email us at nurturingfathers@gmail.com.